Let's now shift our focus to the United Kingdom. British Health Minister Matt Hancock has rubbished the allegations made by the Prime Minister's former chief aide, who accused him of lying. Speaking in the House of Commons, Hancock said that the allegations made by Dominic Cummings were unsubstantiated. Speaking to the MPs, Hancock defended his actions and said that along with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he has been open and transparent in his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
These unsubstantiated allegations around honesty are not true, and that I've been straight with people in public and in private throughout. Every day since I began working on the response to this pandemic last January, I've got up each morning and asked, what must I do to protect life? That is the job of a health secretary in a pandemic. We've taken an approach of openness, transparency, and explanation of both what we know and of what we don't know. I was looking at it this morning. Since last January, I've attended this House, Mr. Speaker, over 60 times. With the Prime Minister, we have together hosted 84 press conferences. I've answered 2,667 contributions to this House and answered questions from colleagues, the media and the public. And we'll keep on with this spirit of openness and transparency throughout.
Yesterday, Cummings told lawmakers that Hancock should have been sacked for repeated failings over the COVID-19 pandemic. Cummings, who was Prime Minister Boris Johnson's right-hand man until late last year, delivered a withering attack on his former boss and Hancock during 7 hours of a testimony before a parliamentary committee on Wednesday, saying that their ineptitude had led to thousands, tens of thousands, in fact, of unnecessary deaths.
I think that there was some brilliant, like in much of the government system, there was many brilliant people at relatively junior and middle levels who were terribly let down by senior leadership. I think that the Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions, in meeting after meeting in the Cabinet room and publicly.
One of the most damning allegations from Cummings was that Hancock's statement that the government had thrown a protective ring around care homes at the start of the pandemic was nonsense, as he says, and that instead people had been sent back from hospital who had contracted the infection.
I don't know about that because I don't really know what the kind of laws are and the rules are, but I think that there is no doubt that many senior people were just terrible. As I said in my opening statement, I think there's no doubt at all that many senior people performed far, far disastrously below the standards which the country has a right to expect. I think that the Secretary of State for Health is certainly one of those people. I said repeatedly to the Prime Minister that he should be fired. So did the Cabinet Secretary, so did many other senior people.
After being blasted by his top former advisor on the COVID-19 response in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson faced the House of Commons, stressing that the government tried to do its best. Johnson reiterated that none of the decisions were easy and that the handling of the pandemic has been the most difficult thing for the UK. He also added that all matters will be reviewed in a public inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, the handling of this pandemic has been one of the most difficult things this country has had to do for a very long time. And none of the decisions have been easy. To go into a lockdown is a traumatic thing for a country. To deal with a pandemic on this scale has been appallingly difficult. And we've at every stage tried to minimise loss of life, to save lives, to protect the NHS, and we have followed the best scientific advice that we can, Mr. Speaker. Of course, all those matters will be reviewed in the course of the public inquiry that I have announced.
Now, for more on this story, WION's London Bureau Chief Mandy Clark is now joining us live from London. Welcome to WION, Mandy. Now, Dominic Cummings' harsh criticism has been targeted this time at the British Health Minister Matt Hancock. How is this being perceived in the United Kingdom?
Well, Dominic Cummings did have an axe to grind. So people are taking a lot of what he's saying with a level of grain of salt. But what's been really interesting is the amount of really forensic detail he has given. And I think that is where we're seeing more and more questions. There's not really doubt that some of these things, especially the turns of phrases that Boris Johnson uses, because he has a very unique way of speaking, when, when he said yesterday that Boris Johnson said he'd get injected on live TV. That does kind of sound like something Boris Johnson would say. So it certainly has a ring of truth. Now, Boris Johnson dismissed, he wouldn't talk to the claims. He said he wasn't going to go case by case on each claim that Dominic Cummings made, and there would be an inquiry. But certainly the language he used seemed to ring true to a lot of it. Of course, in the firing line was Matt Hancock. Largely, he repeatedly said he should have been sacked. What was most interesting was really the care homes. Early on the pandemic, they said there was a protective ring around it. The question is, how could that be? Because they didn't have any testing systems at that time. And the UK at that time was famously bad for tracking and testing COVID patients. So it's difficult to prove. And this is the bit that might catch Matt Hancock out, is if he did allow those patients with COVID to return to care homes, and that's where the highest levels of death in the UK were, then
right.
He will have a lot to answer.
Right, Mandy, thank you so much for all your inputs, and thank you for joining us on WION at this hour. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.